A blue thread of smoke rose from a dry wash where no camp should have been. Jonah Rusk saw it from the saddle just as morning light touched the black rim of the mesa. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. But there was no trail stop out there, no ranch, no soldier road, only broken stone, cactus, and a hard stretch of New Mexico territory where men disappeared without leaving enough behind to bury. He should have ridden past. Instead, he turned his horse toward the smoke, and before the sun cleared the ridge he found two Mescalero Apache sisters bound beneath a burned freight wagon. While three armed men argued over what price they would fetch across the border, by afternoon those three men were dead. By sunset, Jonah was bleeding on Apache ground, and before the night was over, the dead men's kin would ride into that camp, demanding his life. The smoke came thin at first, no more than a pale scratch against the blue. Jonah watched it bend and vanish, then rise again from behind a fold of rock. His horse felt the change in him and slowed. Jonah had spent 12 years learning when not to get involved. He had worn a badge for 6 of them and buried more friends than he liked to count. Since leaving the marshal's office in Socorro, he had kept to freight roads, water holes, and lonely work that paid in coin without asking him to care. But smoke in empty country had a language. This smoke did not climb steady like a cooking fire. It stuttered. It carried the bitter smell of scorched canvas and wet ash. Something had burned quickly, and someone had tried to smother it. Jonah eased his Winchester from the saddle scabbard and rode down into the wash. The first thing he saw was a wheel, half buried in sand, still turning in the breeze. Then came the wagon. It lay broken on its side at the bottom of the wash. One axle snapped, the canvas cover charred into black lace. A crate of coffee beans had split open in the dirt, flower blue and little white ghosts across the stones. A dead mule lay stiff in its harness, already gathering flies. Fresh hoofprints cut through the wreckage. 4 horses in, 3 horses out. Jonah looked harder. No, 5 horses out, if the lighter tracks counted. 2 captives mounted double or forced on foot. Maybe the marks were confused near the rocks, as if someone had fought there. Then he heard a sound, not a scream. Whoever made it had learned not to waste breath on screaming. It was a hard, trapped breath behind stone. Jonah dismounted and moved along the wash with his rifle low. At the far bend, the ravine opened into a pocket of shade beneath an overhanging slab. 3 men were there. One sat on a barrel with his boots crossed, wearing a torn army coat and a yellow scarf at his neck. One watered the horses. The third stood near 2 women seated in the dust with rawhide around their wrists. The women were young, maybe sisters by the shape of their faces and the way they watched the same danger from different angles. The older one sat very still, chin lifted, eyes dark and fixed. The younger kept shifting her weight, searching for the smallest opening. Both wore woven skirts dusted with ash, beaded belts, and travel shawls, torn from struggle. Mescalero, Jonah knew enough to know what he was seeing. These were not prisoners of war. These were women stolen from the road to be sold before their people could track them. The man in the army coat laughed and said something about El Paso money. Jonah stepped from the rocks. The laughter stopped. "Untie them," Jonah said. The man at the horses turned first. His hand moved toward his pistol, then froze when Jonah's rifle settled on his chest. The man in the yellow scarf smiled. Like he had found a joke he meant to enjoy slowly. "You lost, old man? Not yet. You know what they are. I know what you are." The third man, thin and red-eyed, spat into the dust. "Ride on. This ain't your quarrel." Jonah looked at the women. The younger one stared back at him as if she refused to be rescued by a coward. The older one did not move at all, but her wrists turned once against the rawhide, showing where the bindings had cut skin. A memory rose in Jonah so sharply that the wash seemed to vanish. His younger brother, Caleb, standing in a barn door 12 years earlier. 3 riders, 1 bad decision. Jonah arriving after the dust had already settled. For 12 years, Jonah had told himself that the dead do not ask for repairs. But the living do. He lowered the rifle a fraction. "I'll buy your horses," he said. "All 3. You walk out with coin and no graves." The man in the scarf grinned wider. "Hear that? He thinks this is a market." His hand dropped. Jonah fired before the pistol cleared leather. The shot slammed the man backward off the barrel. The horses screamed. The thin man drew and fired wild, the bullet tearing splinters from the rock beside Jonah's head. Jonah worked the lever and hit him in the ribs. The third man had no wish to die fair. He grabbed the younger sister by the shoulder and hauled her up as a shield. Jonah shifted, but the wash exploded with gunfire. Pain hit his left side like a hammer, then his thigh. Then heat opened across his shoulder. He went to one knee, the rifle slipping in his blood-slick hand. The man behind the girl cocked his pistol at Jonah. The older sister moved first. Still bound, she drove both tied wrists into the man's forearm. The shot went into the sky. Jonah drew his Colt with his good hand and fired once. The man dropped at the girl's feet. For a moment there was only ringing. Then the younger sister kicked the pistol away and crawled to Jonah. The older woman found a knife on one of the dead men and sawed through the rawhide. Her hand shook, only after she was free. Jonah tried to speak. Blood filled the corner of his mouth. "Go," he said. The younger one pressed both hands over the wound in his side and shook her head. The older woman said something in Apache. The younger answered sharply. They argued with the speed of people who had no time for fear. Then they dragged Jonah into the shade, cut strips from a saddle blanket, and packed his wounds so hard the world flashed white. He remembered the younger one taking his Colt from his hand, unloading it, then placing it back against his chest, as if returning part of him. He remembered being lifted. He remembered the smoke thinning behind him as the wash fell away. The ride to their camp came in pieces: sky, stone, hoofbeats. A woman's hand pressed against his side, a voice close to his ear, steady as a drum. Once he opened his eyes and saw vultures circling behind them, small and black against the empty blue. Near dusk, cottonwoods appeared along a hidden spring. The camp stood in the green shadow beneath them. Wickiups and hide shelters circled the water. Horses lifted their heads. Children stopped mid-run. Men reached for rifles before they saw who was coming. Then the sisters called out. The whole camp changed. Women ran forward. An old woman cried into the older sister's hair. A boy gripped the younger one around the waist and would not let go. Men looked past them to Jonah, and relief hardened into suspicion so quickly that Jonah understood it even through the fever. A white gunman had arrived bleeding on their land. 3 white men lay dead because of him. Trouble was walking behind him. The headman came through the crowd without hurry. He was broad, shouldered, gray at the temples, wearing a red strip of cloth tied around his hair. His gaze moved from his daughters to Jonah's wounds to Jonah's Colt. He said something. The camp went quiet. Jonah tried to rise and failed. The older sister knelt beside him and spoke fast. The younger one interrupted twice, pointing back toward the wash, then to the blood-soaking Jonah's shirt. The headman listened without showing his thoughts. At last he crouched beside Jonah. His eyes were not grateful, not yet. They were measuring. Jonah met them as long as he could. Then the fever took him. He woke in smoke and darkness, not the bitter smoke from the wagon, but cedar smoke, soft and clean. A hide roof hung low above him. His shirt was gone. His side burned under a tight wrapping. Somewhere outside, a baby cried and was hushed. Somewhere closer, water touched a clay bowl. The younger sister sat near the entrance with his Colt across her knees. "You are alive," she said. Her English surprised him. "So far," Jonah rasped. "My sister says you tried to die twice on the way? Didn't take?" "No," she studied him like a puzzle. "Why did you stop?" Jonah swallowed. His throat felt full of sand. Smoke. That is not an answer. It was the first one. For the first time she almost smiled. "I am Mara. My sister is Elena. Jonah, I know. You said it when fever had you. You said another name, too." Jonah closed his eyes. Caleb. He did not explain. For 3 days, the camp kept him between life and death. Elena changed the bandages with quiet hands. Mara brought water and broth, and asked questions whenever he was too weak to dodge them. The old healer pulled the bullet from his thigh and muttered at him as if he were a stubborn horse. Outside, Jonah heard men returning from the wash. They found the burned wagon. They found the bodies. They found the tracks of riders circling north after seeing the dead. That news moved through the camp like a cold wind. On the 4th evening, the headman entered the shelter. He sat across from Jonah while the fire painted both their faces red. "My daughters went to trade for salt," he said. His English was slow, exact. "They did not come home." Jonah waited. The men who took them believed distance would protect them. They believed no one outside our blood would risk anything. They were wrong. The headman's eyes held him. Were they? Jonah had no answer for that. The headman placed Jonah's Colt on the blanket between them, cleaned, loaded, the grip still stained dark near the brass. "You killed for them," he said. "Now others will come to kill for those men?" "I know. Then you know what you brought here." Jonah looked toward the doorway. Beyond it, he could hear children laughing near the spring, laughter trying to return to a place that had almost lost it. "I brought what was already following them," Jonah said. "But I won't hide behind your people." The headman watched him for a long moment. Then he pushed the Colt closer. "No," he said, "you will not hide." At sundown the riders came, 7 shadows on the ridge, cutting across the orange sky. They rode in loose formation, confident enough to be seen. Jonah recognized the yellow scarves first, then the army coats. The dead men had not been alone in the territory. They had brothers, partners, maybe worse. The camp moved without panic. Women pulled children toward the far shelters. Young men took rifles behind cottonwood trunks and stone. Older men shifted horses away from the open ground. Elena and Mara stood near the spring with bows in their hands, faces calm in a way Jonah knew was not calm at all. The headman told Jonah to stay inside. Jonah reached for his Colt. "You bleed when you breathe," the headman said. "Then I'll breathe careful." Outside, one of the riders shouted Jonah's name. That stopped him. The rider laughed. "We know he's in there. Send him out, and we leave your camp standing." No one answered. Jonah stepped from the shelter before anyone could pull him back. Every eye turned. He walked slowly because speed was no longer something his body offered. His shirt hung open over the bandage. His face was pale. His gun hand shook once before he tightened it. The rider at the front leaned in his saddle. "There he is." Jonah looked at the headman. "This is mine." The headman looked back. "They came to our spring. Now it is ours too." The first shot came from the ridge. It struck a clay pot near the fire and blew water into the dust. Then the camp answered. Rifle smoke burst from the cottonwoods. A rider pitched sideways. Horses screamed. The ridge broke into motion. Jonah fired from behind a low stone wall. Each shot chosen because he had no strength to waste. A rider tried to flank the shelters and found Elena waiting with a rifle she handled like she had been born with its weight. Mara moved children through the smoke, then turned and shot an arrow into the neck of a horse charging too close. The animal reared, throwing its rider hard, but one man broke through. He came low over his horse, pistol out, headed straight for the spring, where a little boy had frozen in the open. Jonah saw the child. He also saw Mara running for him. There was no time to think about belonging, no time to decide who owed what to whom. There was only the old failure rising up in him, and this time a chance to stand in front of it. Jonah left the wall. The world narrowed to hoofbeats. He stepped between the rider and the boy and fired twice. The first shot missed. The second hit the rider in the chest. The man tumbled from the saddle, but his pistol fired as he fell. Jonah felt the bullet pass through his side like a door opening inside him. He went down on one knee. The last two riders saw the line of rifles, saw their dead on the ground, and broke for the ridge. No one chased them. The camp let the desert take them with their fear. For a while Jonah could not hear anything except his own breath. Then small hands touched his sleeve. The boy from the spring stood beside him, wide-eyed and shaking. Mara pulled the child back and dropped to her knees in front of Jonah. Elena was there too. The headman came last, his rifle still smoking. Jonah tried to laugh and failed. "Should stayed inside," he whispered. The headman looked at the blood spreading through the bandage. "Yes," he said, "but then you would not be you." They carried him back beneath the cottonwoods. That night the camp did not sleep. Fires burned low. Men watched the ridges. Women boiled water. Elena and Mara worked beside the healer until the moon crossed the sky and the black mesa turned silver at the edge. Jonah drifted in and out. Once he woke to the headman seated near him. "I had to judge you," the headman said quietly, "not because you are white, because men who arrive with blood often bring more." Jonah's eyes opened. "And?" The headman looked toward the spring, where his daughters sat together in the firelight, alive. "Blood did follow you," he said, "but you stood between it and us." At dawn Jonah woke again. The camp was still. Smoke rose straight into the pale morning, the same blue thread he had followed the day before, or a lifetime before, lifted above the cottonwoods and vanished into the sky. His Colt lay beside him. Next to it was a strip of red cloth. The headman stood at the entrance of the shelter. "This does not make you Apache," he said. "It does not erase what men have done. It does not make the world simple." Jonah looked at the cloth, then at the faces gathered beyond him. Elena, Mara, the boy from the spring, men who had aimed rifles at him 2 days earlier, and now watched as if his answer mattered. The headman continued, "But there is a place by our fire for a man who knows where to stand." Jonah had spent 12 years riding away from the moment he had failed to stand in time. Now the desert had brought him back to smoke, blood, and a choice. He reached for the red cloth, not because he had saved them, because when the riders came, they had saved each other. And for the first time in years, Jonah Rusk did not feel like a man passing through someone else's world. He felt the ground hold.